And so I think a lot of like stories, archetypes come a lot in my work, in terms of like Carl Jung and the archetypes, because a lot of times brands will talk about a lot of different things and they might miss what is that human emotional resonant connection. Um, and stories really help us see what is that universal truth that's threading through it all for us. And that's one of the reasons why I love stories and think of them as superpowers.
Your business's success depends on relationships, relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Victoria Carrington Chavez. She is a storytelling powerhouse, award-winning entrepreneur, and TEDx speaker whose talk has been praised as a masterclass in storytelling. Featured in Telemundo, Fierce by Me Too, and over a dozen podcasts, she brings bold, honest energy to every conversation, on stage, online, and in community. Through her brand, The Story Saloon, she helps creative entrepreneurs and thought leaders own their own story, speak it with confidence, and share it in a way that connects. Her approach is unapologetic, empowering, and rooted in the belief that your story is your superpower. Congrats on the Story Saloon and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Karl. It's so good to be here. I am excited to spend the day with you, or the 20 minutes.
Yes. So I'm really excited to talk with you because I too believe that stories are a superpower, and it's such a foundational part of what makes us human that people often overlook storytelling. They think, oh, everyone tells a story, or I'm not a storyteller, but it's like it's such an untapped resource for so many people. So how do you tell stories that make you unforgettable?
Yeah. So first off, I remind people that, and myself included, is what's the story only you can tell? Because when we think about brands, or when we think about even just being in business or social media in general, there is so much noise out there. And then you think about like AI, there's a lot of times where we can feel like we're hearing and seeing the same thing over and over again. But what is the one thing that only you can tell? And even if it's something that maybe somebody else can tell or has a similar experience, the way that you tell it is going to be unique to you. So that's why I think stories are such a superpower, because they help you really stand out by actually being authentic, being human, being yourself, because your experience is also one of your greatest gifts that you can use to teach.
Yeah, I think that's one of the what's gotten humanity where it is in the world and over like civilization and stuff, is that ability to tell stories and share information in a way that was unique to our species. Because like you don't have to have gone through all the horrible things that your tribe or your family or your parents have gone through to get the lessons from it, because we empathize with people in stories. We feel what they feel physically. Our brains can't tell the difference between stories and reality, so we're able to influence people in a way that is just not possible without storytelling.
Absolutely. And there is a psychological approach to this as well, that stories are kept in a different part of your brain. And so your recall for a story is greater than fact. And so if somebody tells you a fact, you might remember it. But if somebody tells you that same fact in a story, it's stored differently in your brain, that you can recollect it much quicker and faster, which is why brands that use storytelling, brands like Nike, Disney, big brands, have such a huge following and impact, because people can remember the story. They can remember how it feels, even if they don't remember the details of when the Nikes are dropping, or how much Air Jordans cost these days. They remember that when they put on those Nikes, they're a champion.
And you mentioned that they remember the feeling, and it's those feelings that drive the decision making. Because one of my favorite phrases is that as much as we like to think of ourselves as thinking beings that feel, we're very much feeling beings that occasionally think. And so if you're trying to get people to remember facts and figures or to influence their behavior, storytelling is the way to do it, because it's evoking emotions, and emotions drive decisions. So it's just makes a lot more sense than trying to throw a bunch of stats or facts at people, which unfortunately businesses think, because they're already connected to the information, because it's like their business, their brand, their product,
Yep.
they forget that other people don't care about it the same way. And so when they start just spouting features or stats and stuff with no story around it, they are surprised when no one seems to care as much as they thought they would.
Absolutely. This is something I see all the time is, a question that I ask a lot of clients that I work with is, why should your target audience care? And if you're not able to really connect to that question, which is also the power of story, because a lot of times I found that businesses are solving a problem that they themselves have either gone through, conquered, transformed. And that's what your audience wants to hear. They want to hear how you got from point A to point B, because you're meeting them at point A. But then if all you're talking about is, I'm here at point B, you're missing the important part of the journey, the story that really gets them sold and helps them see themselves in your story. I tell brands all the time, if they don't see yourself, if your clients don't see themselves in your story, they won't see themselves as your clients.
And it's also the fact that you're not selling the product or service, you're selling the transformation it has on their lives. And so they don't see how you've transformed because of whatever the product is, or how your transformation was harder, so you made a product that makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
And show how you started where your audience is starting, where they are right now, and bridging that gap, or showing how here's the long windy path I had to take to get to where I am. So I built you guys a shortcut. Here's my shortcut. That sells them on investing in the shortcut, because they see all the other path that you had to take without anyone's help, or without as much help as what you're trying to provide for them. And that's what that juxtaposition sells them on investing in your thing. But if you just show them where you are and go, hey, you can get here, but I'm not going to, they don't know how they're going to get there, or they see the path you took, and I don't want to do that. And because you're not explaining that the journey you took, that makes it a lot more complicated for them to put all the pieces together. And as the more you try and make people work to understand your value, the less they're likely are going to form the right conclusion that you're expecting them to.
Absolutely. They have to see themselves in that transformation, and they have to feel like you can guide them in that transformation. And because a lot of times clients are coming to you because they see the transformation, they see the other side, and they want to know how to get there. And sometimes brands leave out, as you said, that bridge part, and stories are how we bridge that gap. And one of the things that I love about stories is, psychologically, there's this idea called the law of sustainability, meaning that when we're talking about transformation, if we don't see ourselves in that future transformation, we will continue to procrastinate. We'll continue to sabotage. We won't really fully get there. And there are people who use visualization. There's a lot of different tools. So a story that I have is like my TEDx. I wanted to give a TEDx for 15 years. And it wasn't until the last 2 years that I was actively trying. And one of the things that I did is I put on music, and I would kind of walk around my living room in my future TEDx outfit, and I would be like, okay, what does giving a TEDx feel like? Now, part of this story is at that point, I had applied 4 times for 4 different TEDx's, and I got no's to all of them. But I wasn't ready to give up. What I realized is that I wasn't seeing myself fully and embodying that. And once I did, and I really sat and said, what's the story only Victoria can tell? That, combined with that visualization, helped me land my TEDx. And that's the law of sustainability, meaning that we have to truly embody it, visualize it, to help us become it as we're transitioning through that transformation. So
Yeah. And I think it's important for, like you said, the tip about people procrastinating when they don't see themselves in that transformation is important to understand, because the it's part of understanding the human nature behind decision making, and being comfortable with their current state, even if they know it's not good for them, but it's less scary than changing. And
Exactly.
so showing people that, again, the power of telling them that bridge, that story part of the message, it helps show them what's on the other side, and that the future isn't scary, and kind of de-risks a lot of the internal debate they're having with, is this worth investing in? Should I buy this? Should I make this change? Because it's, whenever you're asking people to make a change, you're working against the human nature to kind of stay where we feel safe, even though it's
Yeah.
intellectually we can know that I need to do something. Emotionally, there's all these quote unquote safeguards and survival mechanisms that are left over from like hunter-gatherer tribe days, when wandering over a hill could mean a predator and getting eaten. So the people that survived were afraid of making changes without a big enough reason. So um, stories help you communicate and kind of assuage some of those behavioral remnants that are intended to protect us, but overall these days end up hindering people from achieving their full potential, because it gets triggered by things that aren't really that threatening to us. It's just perceived that way by your brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's stories help us understand the information that's being put in front of us, whether it be statistic, whether it be um, something that is very data driven, but and also helps us understand our positioning to that story, or to that the thing that's being presented. And so I think a lot of like stories, archetypes come a lot in my work, in terms of like Carl Jung and the archetypes, because a lot of times brands will talk about a lot of different things and they might miss what is that human emotional resonant connection. um, and stories really help us see what is that universal truth that's threading through it all for us. And that's one of the reasons why I love stories and think of them as superpowers, because if we can understand what is that universal connector, especially from a value space, it's much easier to find alignment in the people that we're working with, whether they're clients, collaborators, or beyond. That connection is so key if it's value aligned. But if we don't know our values and we're not putting the right messaging in them, how are people going to know how are we going to find that alignment?
Yeah, so it sounds like you have worked with a lot with brands on this. So do you have a particular case study you can share that would help really illustrate this to people?
Yeah, so I have a client that I had worked with who, they were a nonprofit and they had multiple kind of layers to their brand. And they had done a lot of environmental work. They had done a lot of work for education, and they had gone through six. And while I don't outwardly say that I'm a marketer, these skills lend themselves to marketing, their messaging, their brand identity. And so they had gone through six different marketing agencies before they had started working with me. And what I did is I distilled down and I said, what are the common themes? What are the universal truths? What are the emotional resonant ties that are the humanness that you don't need a lot of words to really describe, that people can start to feel? And then we redid their pillars, and now we have like three pillars. And since then, they've been able to grow. They've been able to get more funding. They have a number of media that they've been growing out. They have a podcast. And it's just been really cool to see things really come together by having that clarity in what is their story, not like what is the story over here, what is the story over here, but what is the common theme and the threads of the story and how they all weave together. Because that's what I see a lot in brands is they'll have one great story thread over here, one great story thread over here, and they're not weaving them together to make a tapestry of a rich story that helps people understand who they are, what they do, why they do it, and who they do it for.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's like having like people, different teams in the same boat trying to row in different directions at the same time. You only can go in one direction. So if you're constantly zigzagging between three different
Yes.
directions, you're not going to really go any of those directions well. So if someone's listening who's kind of get a sense, oh, maybe my brand is like that, what's kind of the first step to start bringing those into alignment? What can they start? What's like the first step in that process to find the underlying theme between all of their different existing stories?
So I usually go to what's your why? And I say it of why do you get up in the morning and do this every single day? Entrepreneurship, nonprofits, any sort of creativity, these are hard things. So why are you choosing the hard? And really going from then what is that value? So if, for example, you want to get up every day and you are doing work in wellness and belonging, or as it's formally known as DEI, if you're wanting to do that work, what is the value? You want people to feel connected. You want people to feel seen. You want people to feel like they have a seat at the table. So I always go to what is that human value that we as humans are going to appreciate? And that's why I say, because we can change the words DEI, but the values, the intentions are the same, whether we're calling it belonging or inclusion. So I tell people to start there and then build their story from there. So also adding personal, if you're a personal brand, especially adding some of your own personal antidotes to that. If you want to talk about belonging, talk about a time you didn't feel like you belonged and what steps you took to create that belonging within yourself, your community, within your organization. Those are all really great places to start to show people how you create belonging.
Yeah, I'd imagine for if it's like early stage startup or a smaller nonprofit, it's often going to be the founder or like the
Mhm.
people that started the company's stories that where the or you can pull those from and as you get to a larger and larger organizations, there's still the underlying kind of mission or vision from the founders or what the company is trying to accomplish that you can pull stories from the people that are currently in leadership or that are um, back that from the early founders like the board or like there's just getting more of the people involved in understanding what drives the business forward because it's ultimately comprised of people. And so
Mhm.
if your business is lacking direction, figuring out that and tying it to the people involved is going to really help bring the team together and inspire people to work harder. And so it's even if it seems like you're don't have like that original founder involved,
Mhm.
finding some direction that's grounded in the people and the leadership is going to be important because if you don't have any direction, then you're going to be basically adrift. And with how fast things are going in the marketplace and things are changing, if you don't have that like direction and that drive forward, you're going to get past and be in a big trouble really fast.
Absolutely. It's going to what is the human essence of this brand, especially in a day of a lot of AI. Even if your founder, even if your company is scaled so big and your founder isn't necessarily in the same space, there is some human reasoning and resonance why your founder felt called to create the brand, the business that and build what they have. And so the more that we tell stories from that space, the more we can create that connection. And, I call it a lot of like main character energy. Like, what is that main character and what is interesting and intriguing about them that makes people want to follow along and root for them and be loyal to them? Because that is another piece of this is that if you can build a brand with a beautiful story, people not only follow along, they become loyal to it. And loyalty in business looks like recommendations, referrals, opportunities that you, and getting into rooms and spaces you might not have otherwise. So having that clarity and the confidence to really own your story and lead with it makes you unforgettable and unstoppable.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Victoria. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Victoria, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.